Welcome to China Insider. I'm David Zhang. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and comment below what you think about our topic today. This morning in Beijing, after close to 3,000 votes in a fake election, Xi Jinping officially got his third term in power, now marking the title of Chairman of the People's Republic of China for a third time. Though the title carries much less weight than being the General Secretary of the Communist Party and Chairman of the military, having the title of the President or the Chairman of the PRC still means that he is breaking a precedent set by his predecessors of only allowing 2 terms max, or 10 years. In his third term, the question becomes, will he invade Taiwan? No one but Xi Jinping himself knows whether or not he will invade. The circumstantial argument for a military action is still largely leaning toward him making a move this decade. After all, preparations to invade is underway, including recently reforming the police and spy systems under the party and to command it to establish more control domestically. And also at the same time, they're allowing the military tribunal to work on all citizens during wartime. Politically, Xi's third term marks the beginning of his one-man rule. Last November, Xi concluded his first 10 years with political infighting and removing opposition. Now there's no one to challenge his authority. Xi introduced a new 24-character summary to his goal in the next 10 years. Remain calm, keep steady, stabilize movements, spontaneous actions, united we stand, and courageous struggles. This 24-character slogan was last given by Deng Xiaoping, a former Chinese leader following the events of June 4, 1989, the Tiananmen Square massacre. Observe calmly, secure our position, cope with affairs calmly, hide our intentions, and bide our time, be good at maintaining a low profile, never claim leadership. Notice how the 2 last words, courageous struggles versus never claim leadership. If Deng Xiaoping's words back in the days were marked by the 90s to the 2010s as decades of passive struggles, then Xi's last words indicate seeking opportunities to do something. And that something is Taiwan. As the Chinese state media says, it is not enough to follow Deng's securing our position approach. There is a need now to be proactive for unity and daring to fight, or being good at it, and that will enable the PRC that nothing can stop it moving forward. This has been apparent since he first came into power in 2013, and in fact, in the 19th National Congress in 2017, the report says, which is every 5 years, Xi promised his plan to take Taiwan, claiming to integrate Taiwan into Chinese society. And despite the intra-party fighting, he has repeatedly declared that Taiwan is a historic mission for the Chinese Communist Party to take, something even Mao Zedong could not do. If Xi successfully takes Taiwan, he will be equally viewed in the party and in China as the same as Mao, who was called once the great leader. Also, politically, there's every reason for Xi to do so, to maintain and stabilize his internal power, but also to project outwards. According to the latest intel report by the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Xi Jinping wants to make China the preeminent power in East Asia and a major power on the world stage to replace the United States eventually. But that does not mean coexistence. Taiwan may be close to China geographically, but it is much more aligned with Western values and freedom. China's ultimate goal doesn't stop at Taiwan. It wants to bring about the demise of the United States, and with it, the global democratic order. The question is when. We have many different timelines. Some speculate it could be an invasion as early as 2024, immediately following the results of both the US and Taiwan presidential election, and the transfer of power could be an opening to invade. A US Air Force general recently sent a memo stating his fear that the CCP could do so in 2025. And according to Admiral Phil Davidson, who formerly headed the Indo-Pacific Command, he concludes that the CCP could invade by 2027, which is when Xi's third term will come to a conclusion. It will be a test of his ability as leader, should he choose to invade, and if it happens. There's also the age factor. Xi Jinping is currently 69 years old. By the end of 2027, he will be around 74. Will still he be cognitively capable of personally commanding the invasion? That's something he must do, personally commanding the invasion. Well, this is unknown. Here's the fear factor. Both sides are not ready yet, but time is not on our side. According to Mike Gallagher, chair of the Select Committee on China, quote, "The time to arm Taiwan to the teeth was yesterday." But the simple reason is that the US is preparing for the eventual invasion, so is China. But the US cannot start the process by invading China. It will never happen, yet China has the upper hand and the surprise factor and the lead on this. Before we get to what will deter China from doing it, we have to talk about why. Why Taiwan? Taiwan geographically situates on the South China Sea. It serves as the key link between Japan and the Philippines, forming the first island chain. It is a strategic aspect of what's keeping China's military and its geographical access to the Pacific Ocean so close to mainland China. It's very strategic for China to move its naval and air force further into the Pacific once it does take Taiwan. When Taiwan falls, China will have access to deep water away from Japan's northern sophisticated radar network and can easily send nuclear submarines without the Allies noticing as much. Taiwan's position also serves to project influence over the Philippines and South China Sea, including in South Asia. Eastward, it will also further expand the CCP's claim on territorial water, which it is already doing illegally in the South China Sea, forming a so-called 9-dash lines. Such claims are not recognized by the top body on international water. Still, the CCP has not been following the respective laws either. Crushing the first island chain, as we have talked about, also has economic and military benefits. It allows the CCP to project its naval power eastward, which will then directly threaten, or at minimum, match that of the US naval force in Asia. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, called UNCTAD, estimates that roughly 80% of the global trade by volume and 70% by value is transported by sea. Of that volume, 60% of maritime trade passes through Asia, with the South China Sea carrying an estimated 1/3 of global shipping. Should China choose to militarize the region, it could strategically cut off key shipping routes for the United States. But that's not the main reason in 2023. Chips. The Biden administration is actively limiting the CCP's access to critical and cutting-edge semiconductor technology. Experts believe that this could set China's tech back decades on chip manufacturing, which is powering its military and civilian applications. Taiwan's TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corp, currently services semiconductor for the leading enterprises around the world, including, in some cases, in close to military applications. The CCP would have access to TSMC, and it would instantly boost its availability for technological competition against the United States. Now, there is a factor of whether or not TSMC could give up their technology. But the point is, there's the idea of protecting democracy as well. Should Taiwan fall, it will reflect and reduce the light of democracy around the world and further push Asian neighbors such as Japan, Korea, as well as the Philippines, Vietnam, to kowtow down to the CCP, which allows Beijing to project even more influence in Asia. Now, these are all potential key allies of the United States. There's also many more reasons why. But the point is, Taiwan is a key US interest in Asia and also in the Pacific, which the US is also a part of. Especially in the context of preventing the spread of communism globally and how its military can threaten us if we cannot contain it within the geographical boundary. So what actually will prevent them from starting the invasion? While it may seem super scary that Taiwan becomes scorching earth, there are very valid reasons as to why the invasion could actually never happen in the first place. Xi's domestic economic problems are worse than they're actually being told. At the Two Sessions conference this week, the main focus is economic restructuring. Xi claims that they will reach a 5% GDP growth this year, but is that possible? Since Xi came into office, the assertion of tighter control on the private sector, coupled with the recent COVID-19 measures, have essentially destroyed the Chinese economy. Real estate is in shambles and foreign investments are down. They're not looking to improve either. All this is related to the international relationship, but the former housing idea accounts, for example, real estate is 1/3 of China's GDP. A combination of COVID and a lack of spending, especially buying houses, it has reduced local government's ability to profit. Now, combined with the local governments in recent years overspending on zero-COVID measures, the economy is one of the biggest problems for Xi Jinping to actually fund the invasion. The CCP spent 2022 and the first months of 2023 on campaigns to boost spending, and foreign trade may have actually fallen up to 30% since COVID started. which a large portion of are actually exports. You can't produce during COVID lockdowns, you can't export as much. The CCP could not produce as much when it was during COVID. Now afterwards, the road to recovery is also much more difficult. Consumers and entrepreneurs are not given enough confidence by the regime to actually consume or invest, and that's a really bad thing. However, the CCP will maintain their economic policies because even as the current state seems pretty bad, they think the state direction as necessary to reduce dependence either on foreign technologies or to enable military modernization or just to grow back, ensuring CCP rules, for example, all of these are realizations that its vision for a national rejuvenation, a so-called national rejuvenation, needs to be headed by the state. Now, even though the same policies are actually undermining China's private sector and inhibiting greater growth in economy and economic outlooks, it doesn't seem to matter when politics and control comes first. After enjoying decades of economic growth, though, the Chinese population today do not just blindly follow political slogans. They need to be given incentives, and it requires political values from their leadership. The economic problem is a cost to rule. If the economy is hot, well, as it was relatively to now, since the 90s, people tend to forget or forgive political problems, which has helped to stabilize the communist regime's political power. Take past CCP leadership, for example. During the Mao Zedong era, because everybody was poor, the CCP's ideological propaganda and people's superstitious belief in Mao made the cost of ruling quite low. Now, in a democratic society, the cost of ruling is actually quite high because that's the cost of government services such as basic health care, social welfare, education, construction, foreign affairs, and perhaps defense. But the CCP has another layer, or by nature adds another cost, and that is something that regular politicians don't have to pay, which is the cost of suppressing the people and the cost of propaganda and deception. Now can be said that the cost of the barrel of a gun, the military, and the barrel of a pen, which is the propaganda, is equally as important for a communist party regime. The economy is not doing so hot, which means that the cost to sustain both will be equally as difficult, and that could drag down the CCP. China also faces myriads of other problems, both domestically and internationally. An aging population, for example, high levels of corporate debt, corruption, economic inequality, growing resistance internationally over its aggressive tactics used on its neighbors. These are all factors that's alienating or basically deterring China from invading. With all that being said, China has a saying called, "Cornering a dog will make them jump over walls." The idiom means that if one is pressured enough, they will act irrationally. A dictator has just one thing that we all fear: nuclear weapons. If Putin, we view them in the Ukrainian war as the example of why the West have not been engaging full-on, sending troops in, especially the Europeans, well, it's because Putin has nuclear weapons. And it is a point that Xi Jinping views very well. And very importantly, it is that the fact that there's the nuclear deterrent factor on both sides that he could use as a bargaining chip. Because the war in Ukraine has taught us that Western governments fear nothing more than a nuclear winter. Putin has successfully bid on that idea, right? And used the threat of nuclear war to keep Europe out of the war. And could Xi actually do the same over Taiwan? And there's the possibility. There's also the possibility that pushing the CCP into a corner where it's, for example, the economic problems are too high and has no other things but to go to war to survive, well, then that is actually going to be the case where they will act like a crazy dog. Although it's pretty unlikely that it will reach that point, given what we've been seeing basically so far is a rescue effort from within the regime to reduce the economic troubles. But there's always that problem, right? It could happen. History has taught us that no matter how powerful a nation could be at the moment, in the grand scale of things of world history, we've seen powerful empires fall. The Mongolians, Romans, Russians, Ottoman, China, the Great Britain. The names of these empires went so massive, so well known, but their endings are all the same. China under the CCP is not the dragon it appears to be. There's many problems that dictate why. There's the military corruptions too, all the way to the top. And many parts of that actually is still very behind in terms of the United States in comparison. For example, its most powerful war machines are stolen tech from Russia and the United States. The fighting will, the lack of experience in an actual participation of war, there's many factors that intertwine in the decision of invading Taiwan. Whether that's the economy, the corruption, Xi's personal factors, military, there's simply many things that we have to consider, which is why we can't conclude if the invasion will happen or not. But what we can, however, recognize is the fact that war preparation is underway. Here's my personal belief. I think there's an existential crisis in our lifetime. The Chinese Communist Party represents the greatest threat to humanity, not just Americans. And there's an inevitable war of some form or some kind happening, whether that's direct military or economic warfare or tech warfare or space warfare. The method of engagement could be bullets, missiles, or Benjamins. But the point is, this seems inevitable, that the US and China will have to fight it out. And what we hope for is actually not a coexistence, because our enemies don't want that either. But what we also want to see is a cool-headed plan with the least amount of damage, hopefully with no casualties. Nobody wants to go to war, but we face an enemy that really wants us dead. And so I think we better be prepared to defend ourselves. And that's the point I want to make. All right, today's episode was on how Taiwan, or if Taiwan, will be invaded by the Chinese Communist Party. And I hope you enjoy the content. If you do, like and subscribe to our channel and comment below what you think. Do you think China will invade? If they will, when will they do so? I'm David Zhang. This is China Insider. We'll see you next time.